Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a pretty successful run I had in an online Pokemon Go tournament with a team that had a couple pretty unorthodox Pokemon. Now this tournament was a Show 6 Pick 3 style tournament, and with over 50 trainers competing, we ended up doing 6 rounds of a Swiss style bracket. And now, let's take a look at the team that I used. I feel that this team ended up being a nice mix of some strong meta staple Pokemon paired with some spicier picks that can catch opponents off guard. To start off with, on the spicier side of things, I have Ferrothorn. I really like Ferrothorn's coverage in the current meta. It has the ability to hit both sides of the Skarmory plus Water Core, which in this meta is often Whiscash, and with the Steel subtyping, you're able to crush Cresselia and put up a neutral, although slightly losing fight against Shadow Gligar. Next up, Shadow Latios, which is a counter resist, which I think is very nice for the team. Additionally, it's just fast move pressure personified, and if teams don't build particularly strong against dragon damage, Shadow Latios can be very scary whether I bring it or have it as bench pressure. Next up, I have a normal non-shadow Feraligatr, and this was intentional. I do have a shadow, but I wanted to bring the normal one because it is stronger against Cresselia. Since I don't take the extra damage from being the shadow, I can survive a grass knot pretty comfortably, and the normal Feraligatr is also more comfortable safe switching into a Shadow Gligar lead, as since I'm non-shadow, I can take damage a lot better. Next up, Annihilate. I hunted for hours to try and get an IV spread like this one, and we're going to see a bit later on. This is a very attack-weighted Annihilate, and it's going to come in handy quite a few times in this series. And then finally, to round it out, with some strong meta staples of Vigoroth and Skarmory. Vigoroth, the ultimate generalist, as it basically has no bad matchups unless it is stuck against an Annihilate, and Skarmory, very good at shutting down Cresselia and Gligar, and flying is almost unresisted across the entire meta. So the stage is set, and in round 1, I'm paired up against a formidable opponent, Just Dirk, a player who has qualified for the World Championships in Hawaii later this season. His team has Shadow Gligar, Mandibuzz, Lantern, Annihilate, Cresselia, and Carbink. At first look, my Ferrothorn looks amazing if it can steer clear of that Annihilate, and I really like the neutral play that my Feraligatr can bring if it's able to avoid the Lantern. Leads are set for game number 1. I choose to lead Annihilate, but Annihilate is met with Mandibuzz, a hard counter. Not a good start. I'm going to throw one counter and then safe switch into Feraligatr. Feraligatr farming up to the Ice Beam, opponent will fire off energy before I'm able to get there. They're going to go for the Dark Pulse. Again, another reason why I do like the non-shadow Feraligatr is I can better tank energy from Mandibuzz. Ice Beam will connect, that does substantial damage. Unfortunately, it looks like I did lag there, so I end up missing a Shadow Claw. Aerial Ace will connect, opponent sends in the Annihilate looking for the snipe, but the Feraligatr on 1 HP makes the Hydro Cannon and grabs a shield from my opponent. And now I can send in my Annihilate. I should be winning charge attack priority over basically every other Annihilate, but I do happen to know from doing practice against him before that Dirk also runs an extremely high attack Annihilate, and his actually wins charge attack priority on his Night Slash to my Shadow Ball. So the Night Slash will connect. That's damage that I really wish that I hadn't taken, but the good news is I got rid of his Annihilate, and the Mandibuzz is in a range where I can potentially knock it out with a Thunder from Ferrothorn. So when the Mandibuzz gets brought back in, I'm going to send in the Ferrothorn. We don't see a switch, and since the Annihilate's gone, there is no hard counter left for the Ferrothorn. So Ferrothorn should have some pretty nice play in the back. I throw Bullet Seed, wait a turn to make sure my opponent is unable to catch the Thunder, and the Thunder will be shielded up. So whatever's in back, they are not a fan of the Ferrothorn. I will commit the shield on the Ferrothorn as the opponent goes for another Dark Pulse. I'm looking to overfarm, go for the Thunder on charge attack priority. Thunder should be able to pick up the knockout and knock Mandibuzz out of the sky. In the back, it's Carbink, and Ferrothorn is absolutely cooking here in game number 1. Power Whip connects, dealing super effective damage. Carbink will go for the Rock Slide, but Rock Slide's not going to cut it. Ferrothorn with that Steel typing, able to resist that damage and fire off Power Whip number 2. This will get them deep into the red, and then I can finish the game with Annihilate. In comes Annihilate. Annihilate is going to get a counter farm down, and we take game 1 in this best of 3 series. I loved how flexible Feraligatr felt in that game, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put Feraligatr on the lead this time, and since I'm expecting my opponent might try and bring Gligar, I'm going to put Skarmory in the back. Leads are set for game number 2, Feraligatr versus Cresselia, and this is a very okay lead for me. I ran a pretty risky line, where if I saw Lantern lead, I was in a tremendous amount of trouble. But I made the read that since I brought Ferrothorn last game, it would be very tough for my opponent to think about bringing the Lantern. Interestingly enough, when I threw the first Hydro Cannon, my opponent didn't get a sneak through. I thought it was charge attack priority at first, but it turns out they waited the turn to try and watch for a catch, and since I just threw my move instantly, they didn't get their sneak. So I can farm up one more than I typically would, go for the cap tie. I kind of want to let this go and farm down with the Skarmory, but Skarmory energy is useless if they have a Lantern in the back, so I'm just going to shield. Opponent sends in the Annihilate, trying to snipe, but I'm able to make it to the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon will connect. They're going to get a farm down. They can make a Shadow Ball before I can make it to a move, so I'm just going to go for a one-shield farm down play with my Annihilate. So I send in the Annihilate. My opponent will fire off energy. I wasn't quite sure if they were at 7 or 8 here, because it all comes down to if they got a one-turn switch in or not. So I commit the shield. It ends up being a Night Slash, which is not ideal, and they're able to make a second one as well. So they do get some pretty solid damage onto my Annihilate. It all depends what's in the back here. I'm not expecting Gligar, and it's Mandibuzz once again. I'm feeling pretty good about my position here in this endgame. I land the Shadow Ball. I'm going to try and go for an Aerial Ace catch. I don't get the catch, but my opponent is still going to need a lot of Dark Pulses if they want to get rid of the Skarmory. Skarmory is just going to continue to farm up so much energy. Opponent tries to go for charge attack priority, and I get a Steel Wing for free. This energy will be so useful. In comes Cresselia. I should be able to throw 5 in the move. Oh, but the miscount. They can make it to a move. This will get me low. I could potentially Steel Wing down, but I'm pretty low, so I think, you know what? As long as I can just get 2 moves off with the Skarmory, I should be winning. Because I should be 1 off of a move with my Annihilate. So I will fire off the Sky Attack. Sky Attack is going to be shielded. I send in the Annihilate, but I'm 2 off instead of 1. And that miscount is going to cost me this game. Oh, this was such a winnable game if I just farmed down with the Skarmory, but the misplay comes back to haunt me, and it's 1-1. The fact that this is a game 3 is definitely frustrating. If I played better in game 2, we wouldn't be here playing. I would be on to the next round already. I'm just going to go back to the game 1 line that works so well, using the Annihilate, the Feraligatr, and the Ferrothorn. And in game number 3, I lead the Annihilate into the Shadow Gligar, and this is terrible. I do have 2 better responses in the back, so I save switch into Feraligatr. Opponent is going to respond with Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz firing off the Dark Pulse as soon as they get there. Dark Pulse will connect onto Feraligatr. So far, my opponent with the ABA Flyer strategy, hard predicting that I would use the Annihilate once again. This is very unfortunate for me. My opponent will fire off their energy. I'm just going to let this through. Aerial Ace, I can survive, and I'm going to be able to undertap the Ice Beam, and Ice Beam will do some very nice damage. Unfortunately, it seems that my Annihilate is basically useless. So I think my best course of action is just to send in the Annihilate, use it to absorb multiple Aerial Aces, then try and sweep with the Ferrothorn in the endgame. They go for the Aerial Ace. I can tank another. They pivot into the Gligar, and this is really bad. Very nice aggressive play by my opponent. Hard reading that I don't have the Skarmory in the back, and I don't, so I'm in trouble. I will fire off the Night Slash bait after shielding. I get the shield, and now it's all up to Ferrothorn. If I can knock out with a Power Whip here, I should be hopefully in an okay spot, as long as it's not Annihilate in the back, but a Power Whip comes close, but it does not knock out, and they have so much energy available on this Gligar. I commit the shield, I get baited, and this means they're going to be able to land the nuke move right here with a fraction of HP. The dig lands on the Ferrothorn, and it is Annihilate in the back, so my opponent making the hard read that I'd go back to the game 1 line, and I'm going to lose the first round of the tournament. Coming into this tournament, I had a lot of confidence, so this was a little bit of a shock to drop round 1, but the good news is there's still 5 more rounds, and I can try and get some redemption. My next round opponent is Ace9772, who's running Shadow Whiscash, Mandibuzz, Registeel, Annihilate, Dugong, and Altaria. At first glance, my Vigoroth looks amazing if it can dodge the Annihilate, and again that normal Feraligatr looks incredibly neutral as well. Leads are set for game number 1. I lead the Vigoroth, and it dodges the Annihilate, so it sees a good lead versus Dugong. My opponent is not switching out of this matchup, which is incredibly good for me. I'm expecting that they could very well have the Annihilate in the back. Vigoroth is so threatening that they're probably going to be pressured to bring the Annihilate basically every game, in which case I would love an energy advantage to take it on. So instead of just farming down, I'm going to get them into 1 fast move range and snipe with Feraligatr. And this is very important because now if my opponent answers this with Annihilate, which they do, I can always outpace because Annihilate to Night Slash is 10 turns, and Feraligatr to Hydro Cannon is also 10 turns. So the one Shadow Claw head start puts me in an incredibly good position here. My opponent goes for the Night Slash, I can no shield, again, because I'm the non-Shadow Feraligatr, I tank that very comfortably. I can make another Hydro Cannon, opponent is going to double shield and farm all the way down. And now I have my Annihilate in a near unlosable position. I will commit the shield, opponent full sends the Shadow Ball in the back, it's Registeel. And this is just a very comfortable win for the Annihilate. I don't have to shield whatever they throw here. Opponent ends up going for a little bit of a bad manners focus blast there. You'll love to see it. Just understanding that the game is in fact over. I will fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will connect to the Registeel, and I have the Night Slash available for the Annihilate. So game one, Vigoroth proving to be great at winning the lead, and the energy advantage on Feraligatr is just devastating versus my opponent's Annihilate. For game number 2, I'm expecting my opponent to bring Altaria somewhere on the team. So I decide that I'm going to lead the Feraligatr, have Shadow Latios, and then put Skarmory in the back, so that way I have some pretty nice coverage across the board in case my opponent decides to bring that Altaria. And even if I do see Registeel, Shadow Latios can do quite well into Registeel since it does resist its charge moves. We have Feraligatr into Registeel on the lead. I can win the 2s, but I decide to save switch into the Latios, hoping my opponent stays in, but they do not. They send in Mandibuzz, and this is really not ideal, as Mandibuzz absolutely destroys the poor Latios. There's just a massive difference in bulk here. As you can see, just off of Snarl damage alone, I'm at half HP. I will fire off this Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw will get them low. Opponent, this is only an Aerial Ace. I can survive the Aerial Ace. The question will be who gets the farm down first. And it ends up being a simultaneous KO. And this is really not great because once the Latios is gone, I'm very weak to Registeel. My opponent sends in Altaria, I build up to the Ice Beam, they catch onto the Registeel, a beautiful catch by my opponent, but this potentially gives me an opportunity, because now they've switch locked the Registeel against the Feraligatr. So they were able to make a very nice catch, but this is the alignment that I need. I need the Feraligatr against the Registeel, and just to get the Registeel as low as I possibly can. It's charge attack priority, I have to shield up the Feraligatr, they go for the Zap Cannon. Zap Cannon does get the attack drop, which is very unfortunate. I'm going to be firing off the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon is going to be shielded up by my opponent. My opponent, oh, I'm able to get another Hydro. This is good. The question will be, can I put it into Steel Wing farm down range for the Skarmory? Oh, I don't think it is. The Registeel's low, but Steel Wing does not do a lot here. In comes the Skarmory. If Skarmory gets the farm down, it wins the game, but the Registeel hangs on with a fraction of HP, makes the Zap Cannon. That just does too much damage. A Brave Bird can't KO from this health range. Opponent gets a nice combo play with the Altaria, and unfortunately, we're going to a game number 3. This game 3 feels like a must-win game, as starting a tournament 1-1 is way better than starting a tournament 0-2. I honestly liked the Feraligatr Skarmory core, but I felt like the Shadow Latios ended up being a little bit too risky since it was countered by the Mandibuzz. So instead, I'm going to run the same core as last time, but with Vigoroth instead of the Latios. Game number 3, we've got the same leads as game 2, Feraligatr versus the Registeel, but this time I'm learning from my mistake and I'm staying in this matchup, as Feraligatr is able to win the 2-shield here. Feraligatr fires off the Hydro Cannon, opponent lets the first one through, and that is very, very nice for me, as I can make 3 Hydro Cannons before 2 Zap Cannons are reached. The pacing of Feraligatr, absolutely insane. Opponent does get the attack drop from the Zap Cannon, so, I mean, I'm not going to be able to knock out with 1 Hydro, but I have 2 here. So, I'm going to be able to land this. If my opponent shields it or not, I'm very okay, because I can just keep the Feraligatr healthy, and a healthy Feraligatr is a nuisance for my opponent's entire team. Zap Cannon will connect. They're going to send in a Dugong save switch. I'm able to answer with the Vigoroth, and Vigoroth steering clear of the Annihilate is a key to victory. Icy Wind will connect. I'm farming up as the Vigoroth, going for the Rock Slide. This will not KO, nor will it put it in farm down range, because my opponent was able to apply the debuff first. It will get them pretty low. Ideally, I would rather not farm down here. Instead, I'd rather just get farm. So my opponent is actually going to let themselves get lower, which is a really nice play, but I can get energy on the Feraligatr. In the back, it's Annihilate, and this is just a winning position for me. If they no shield, I can farm down. If they shield, I can send in the Skarmory, and I just keep farming to watch for a catch now. My opponent switches into the Registeel. Registeel cannot make the move. Skarmory gets the farm down, and the opponent concedes the match. We now move to 1-1 in the tournament, which is massive, and now we get to take a look at our round 3 opponent, Ficht. Ficht has a team of Shadow Whiscash, Lantern, Skarmory, Altaria, Cresselia, and Vigoroth, so right off the bat, Ferrothorn again looks amazing. There's 2 water types, there's 2 flyers, although Altaria isn't very comfortable for Ferrothorn, and Cresselia. So I'm definitely bringing Ferrothorn game 1, and I also do want to bring Skarmory, as if it dodges Lantern, then Skarmory's energy is incredibly good. The leads are set Skarmory into Vigoroth. Unfortunately, I would rather this on the Annihilate, but Annihilate still has a ton of neutral play into Ficht's team. My opponent will try and go for the charge attack priority tie. I decide to shield because I don't think it's very likely that they're going to bait. I'm going to throw right before they make the move, but my opponent reads me like a book with a perfect catch onto Skarmory. Here I should switch instantly, but I wait till the last second, and that gives me a 1-turn switch. This is bad because instead of being able to fire off the Shadow Ball and winning charge attack priority, I'm 1 turn behind, so my opponent is actually able to force the final shield. I'm going to massively overfarm with the Annihilate. I was a little worried a Night Slash wouldn't quite KO here, so I decide to just fire off the Shadow Ball. They end up shielding. I can cap tie with the Night Slash, and now, are they willing to give up both shields to get rid of the Annihilate? The answer is yes, they are. But this is honestly okay. I can get farm on the Skarmory. And Skarmory's energy goes everywhere into this team if they don't have a Lantern. They aggressively pivot into the Vigoroth. Vigoroth now has the Rock Slide. Sky Attack gets them low. The switch into the Ferrothorn, getting the Bullet Seed through and catching the Rock Slide where it is going to be resisted. And now I get a farm down as well. We know they have the Skarmory. The Skarmory does not have a lot of energy. The final Pokemon still yet to be revealed, but with the Vigoroth gone, I'm guaranteed to have a pretty good matchup. I overfarm as much as I can, playing to charge attack priority. Ferrothorn going to be able to knock out the Skarmory with the Thunder in the back. It's Altaria, and this game number 1 is going to be a win. Ferrothorn will be able to connect with the neutral Thunder, and then it's just a matter of waiting my timer. Clock is almost up. In comes the Skarmory. Skarmory cannot be knocked out by any one move here. My opponent is going to go for the harder hitting Moonblast. Moonblast will connect, but I am going to be able to make it to the Brave Bird, and this is definitely Brave Bird range. So Skarmory delivers the knockout blow to the Altaria, and we take the game 1 win. For game 2, I'm expecting my opponent is going to bring out the Lantern, so I decide to bench the Skarmory, and I decide to bench the Ferrothorn and instead bring Shadow Latios, which is play into both the Vigoroth and the Lantern. I lead my own Vigoroth, and we've got the Mirror as the leads, so my opponent's sticking to the same lead. This is very okay for me. My plan here is to trade Body Slams and then catch the second one onto my Annihilate, because even though my opponent does have Altaria and Cresselia, which are technically Annihilate counters, Annihilate can still do quite well there. I shielded the Body Slam, and instead of going for charge attack priority, I'm going to catch the Body Slam, saving the energy for later, and I'm expecting my opponent will respond with the Altaria, but they send out the Lantern. Honestly, this is a bit uncomfortable, as I would obviously much rather have the Lantern going up against the Latios. I fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will connect, massive damage onto the Lantern. If they Thunderbolt me, that's very okay by me. They're going to go for a Surf and attempt for a farm down here, but it ends in a simultaneous KO. I'm expecting it's Altaria as the third. I'm going to send in the Vigoroth. My opponent sends in the Altaria. I'm going to build up to double Body Slam and bait. I should be able to make a Rock Slide if they shield, but honestly, if they shield, I'm just going to switch into the Latios. The thing I have to watch for is a catch. Opponent should now basically be energy dry. They still do have the Vigoroth available, so I'm just going to farm past the move. Opponent goes for the catch. In comes the Vigoroth. I'm going to try and get the double up, but as soon as I click it, I realize I'm 1 Dragon Breath short, and I think Altaria knocks me out here. They do. I don't get the second move, but I have energy on the Vigoroth. Will a Body Slam be enough to knock out here? Body Slam gets them low. Counter versus Dragon Breath, and we take this series 2-0 and move to 2-1 overall in the tournament. My next round opponent is another Worlds Qualified battler, Jocko Loco, and he's running some amazing spice with Amoonguss, Shadow Charizard, Guzzlord, Obstagoon, Cresselia, and Gligar. In this match, I'm really going to have to rely on Vigoroth and the energy from Skarmory when shields are down. The leads are set for game number 1. I lead Feraligatr into Cresselia, and as we've seen in previous matches, this is a lead that I'm very comfortable playing out. Of course, I would much rather have it on the Skarmory in the back, but I will definitely take this lead. I go for the Hydro Cannon. My opponent has to have an extremely high rank Cresselia because it took that damage extremely well. Cresselia will fire off the Grass Knot. I know I can survive it, and I think that energy will actually be very valuable here. So instead of going for the Hydro Cannon, I'm actually going to commit a shield and then look to overfarm so I can make it well over 2 Hydro Cannons. This way I leave with energy, and my goal here is no matter what I see, I'm switching into the Vigoroth because Vigoroth is so safe. It's the Charizard I send in the Vigoroth. I'm not even building up to the Rock Slide, but this is intentional. I don't want the Charizard to shield. Instead, I would rather have this damage because that does so much damage. Up a shield, I'm expecting my opponent will not bait, so I commit the shield. I get the shield call right on the Blast Burn in the back. It's Amoonguss, and the Amoonguss is running Astonish as its fast move. Amoonguss is an incredibly spicy pick, so you absolutely love to see it. Unfortunately for my opponent, even though the Amoonguss has 2 shields, I'm able to continue to apply pressure with the Vigoroth, and I have the Skarmory available in the back. Amoonguss firing off energy. They go for the Grass Knot. Goodbye to the Vigoroth. I know that I can force the final shield with Feraligatr, and once shields are down, Skarmory's energy is just devastating into this team. So I can now send in the Skarmory. My opponent is going to be stuck throwing Foul Place here, and Foul Play does not get same type attack bonus, so it does not do a lot whatsoever. The Skarmory, I'm just going to go for the Sky Attack. Let's just get rid of this Pokemon. Sky Attack picks up the KO. In comes the Charizard. Charizard unable to make the Blast Burn required, and we take game number 1. Honestly, I think the game 1 line worked amazingly, and I think it's going to be very hard to counter the game 1 line, so I decide I'm just going to run it back with the exact same team. Feraligatr on the lead with Vigoroth and Skarmory in the back. I lead Feraligatr, my opponent leads Cresselia once again, so not a bad matchup whatsoever. This time I do want to play it out slightly differently. I would love to save energy on the Feraligatr and potentially be able to go for a catch onto the Vigoroth, so I can save energy and potentially lure out that Charizard, because Charizard is quite scary for my team. It's really the reason why I'm not running the Ferrothorn in this matchup, because that Charizard is just a real pain to deal with. So I bank the energy, I get the catch of the Grass Knot onto the Vigoroth, and now this is pretty close to Body Slam range. They're forced to send in the Shadow Charizard. I'm going to fire off the Body Slam, again not building up to the Rock Slide because I don't want my opponent to shield. But my opponent is going to commit the shield. I'm farming up a ton of energy. Opponent, oh, they actually go for the Cacti here. They farmed past the double Dragon Claw, and that means that I only have to commit 1 shield to get their second shield back, which is quite nice for me, because as long as I get the shield, and I still have 1 shield remaining, they can farm down and leave with all this energy, but I can bring in the Feraligatr, click the Hydro Cannon. Even though I lose Charge Attack priority, I can shield, and I can guaranteed remove the Charizard from the field of play. And then I have Skarmory in the endgame, and once Charizard is gone, Skarmory is just absolutely unbeatable in the Zero Shield. In comes Obstagoon. Obstagoon going to start spamming out the Night Slashes. A boost could still be a loose con, but the boost does not happen. That's quite nice. Opponent will try and go for a catch onto Cresselia. I'm going to overfarm and fire off the Sky Attack before they're able to make a move. I'm learning from that mistake in round 1. I don't want to take any unnecessary damage, and I'm going to throw a couple extra Steel Wings to put it into Brave Bird range. Brave Bird against the Obstagoon will pick up the KO, and I take the 2-0 victory. I now move to 3-1 overall in the tournament, and my 5th round opponent is Firestar73. His team, Shadow Feraligatr, Registeel, Vigoroth, Shadow Dragonair, Cresselia, and Mandibuzz. Against the No Annihilate team, Vigoroth will always look amazing, so that's what I decide to lead, and I lead it into Mandibuzz, which is a great matchup for me. Especially since I have Annihilate in the back, and Annihilate, if it's not against the Mandibuzz, looks amazing. So I'm in an incredibly favorable position to start off game number 1. The Rock Slide will connect, opponent can return fire with the Dark Pulse, but Vigoroth more than happy to absorb that energy. Opponent will have to throw their charge attack as soon as they get it, or I'm going to be able to outpace and make the next Rock Slide. So they will go for the Dark Pulse. I switch into Feraligatr, and it's a simultaneous switch, Feraligatr versus Registeel. That's a bit of an unfortunate simultaneous swap, as if they had switched earlier, I would have just sent in the Annihilate onto the Registeel. But the good news is Feraligatr can win the 2-shield as long as you're not down energy, without taking a single move. So I could leave very debuffed, but I'm going to leave it 100% HP as long as I use both my shields. My opponent does get the debuff, so I'm able to get them quite low, but not enough to pick up the KO. I will go for the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon is going to be no shielded. My opponent sends in their own Feraligatr. I'm going to go for a catch onto Vigoroth, and we actually simultaneously switch. We both try and go for the catch. The Body Slam not going to KO, but I should be able to get a Shadow Claw farm down with my Feraligatr. So now I do exit with energy, and since I'm the non-Shadow Feraligatr, I'm not in Hydro Cannon range from my opponent's Gator. So I'm able to grab the shield with the Hydro Cannon. I'm farming up, going for the Hydro Cannon, and I didn't see a sneak. So this should be a charge attack priority tie, which means my opponent cannot overfarm anymore. They're forced to throw energy. I'm expecting a bit of an undercharge here. My opponent just going to get rid of my Feraligatr, but Annihilate is just winning in this endgame because I do still have a shield available. So I can commit the shield. My opponent should still be one off the move, so I can throw one more counter. Night Slash guaranteed to knock out here. And after a rough start, we've definitely turned it around as we've won quite a few games in a row, and now we move to 1-0 in this series. I'm going to use the same trio for game number 2, but I'm going to lead the Annihilate as I'm expecting my opponent to switch it up to a Vigoroth lead. So I'm leading the Annihilate, opponent leads Vigoroth, and that should basically be game over on the spot. They save switch into Mandibuzz. I can respond with the Vigoroth, and the nice thing is now that I've seen the Mandibuzz, switch advantage does not matter to me. Even if my opponent wins switch, my Annihilate, up energy, and potentially up a shield can do perfectly fine going up against something like a Cresselia. So I will fire off the Rock Slide. Opponent is going to let that through. They're firing off more energy. I can still survive a Dark Pulse here. My opponent will go for the Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace does not knock out, and I'm going to fire off the Body Slam. I go for an undercharge because I want farm. Opponent commits the shield to try and win switch advantage. And yep, I should just be in a completely one position now because I can get energy on the Annihilate. And Annihilate up energy and up a shield absolutely smacks Cresselia. It is going to be Cresselia. I'm going to wait the turn there to make sure they don't catch the Shadow Ball onto Vigoroth and fire off the Shadow Ball. And this is one of the matchups where my extremely attack-weighted Annihilate comes in handy. It is very high attack and very high defense and very low HP. And due to the high attack, I actually do 1 extra damage per counter going up against Cresselia. So after landing a Shadow Ball, I can actually counter down a lot easier. There, I ended up waiting and my opponent waited as well. So the visuals looked a little odd, but I'm able to land the Shadow Ball. They go for the Moonblast. They send in the Vigoroth. And this is just a completely one position because even after I've taken a lot of damage on the Annihilate, it's still so dominating versus this Vigoroth. Vigoroth will go for the Rock Slide as it is only single resisted. I can bank the Night Slash and then just send in the Feraligatr. And Feraligatr, yeah, I mean, this game is just over. My opponent's clock shouldn't be up, but on the off chance it is, I'll wait the turn anyway just to go for the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon will be able to pick up the KO, and Cresselia is low enough that I can just Shadow Claw down and take the win. This is my 4th straight win, moving me to 4-1 in the tournament, and in the final round, I'm up against Ike the Bot, running a wild team with Shadow Feraligatr, Registeel, Hyper Beam Lopunny, Shadow Kanto Ninetales, Runerigus, and Whimsicott. So I'm going to have my hands full as this Runerigus looks like a nightmare. Game number 1, I lead the Feraligatr, and my opponent is leading their own Feraligatr, although their Feraligatr is running Hydro Cannon and Crunch, which does make the mirror a bit uncomfortable since I am not running Crunch. I'll fire off the Hydro Cannon, that will connect, dealing significant damage. My opponent doesn't really have a reason to bait, but since I'm the non-Shadow Feraligatr, I can tank the Crunch, and since they didn't get the debuff, I can make it to the Hydro Cannon, which is incredibly good. The Hydro Cannon will be shielded. I decide to pivot into the Vigoroth, and I have a tough choice to make. I decide to let this go. I'm going to save shields for Annihilate in the back. My opponent sends out the Runerigus, and I've just lost. This is incredibly bad. Had I shielded the Vigoroth, I would have been in a better spot, because even though Runerigus is a complete wall to Vigoroth, it can't really do any damage to it. But at this health range, my opponent can Sand Tomb, go for a double resisted Shadow Claw farm down, and the energy that they have is just going to completely overwhelm me in this endgame. Rock Slide will connect. I've done some solid damage, but I have no fast move pressure. I send in the Annihilate. I get the catch onto the Vigoroth. Please tell me it's the Shadow Ball. It is the Shadow Ball. Maybe there's a path back into this game. But my opponent can just go straight Sand Tomb now because this is my final Pokemon and I can't reset the debuff. I'm going to overfarm as much as I can. Go for the Night Slash, but there's the back-breaking catch by the opponent. Catching the Night Slash on a Feraligatr, and I'm not even going to get to see their final Pokemon. I just no-shield as I know it's a Sand Tomb. I can make the Night Slash, But my opponent is not going to want to reveal the information of what they had in the back. So they're just going to shield, farm me down, and I lose game 1 in a pretty tough fashion. I did not win 4 rounds in a row just to lose 0-2 in the final round, so I need to make some adjustments. The first of which, Annihilate not being brought for the rest of this series. It's too risky. Instead, I'm going to pivot to Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn not only does amazing into Runerigus, but it also does well into Whimsicott. And since I ran so weak to Whimsicott game 1, I wouldn't be surprised to see Whimsicott in game number 2. So I'm locking in the team. Vigoroth lead, Feraligatr, Ferrothorn in the back. Vigoroth sees a Pokemon that isn't Runerigus, and I am so happy. Leading into the Whimsicott, and this is great for me, as Vigoroth should be able to win the Zero Shield here because a Moonblast doesn't knock out, whereas 2 Body Slams plus the counters definitely will. And with the Body Slam, they're already below half HP, which is terrific. And I'm just hoping against hope that Ferrothorn can put in work in the endgame. They go for the Moonblast, and they get the attack drop. That's absolutely awful. That means they can now win the Zeros. The Body Slam connects. They pivot into the Ninetales, and I'm so happy they sent this in, as this would absolutely crush the Ferrothorn in the back. Ninetales fires off the Weather Ball. This is open team sheet, so I know they're on Weather Ball and Overheat, so they do not have the Scorching Sands to hit for neutral. And I can fire off the Hydro. Hydro connects. Goodbye, Ninetales. And my Ferrothorn should be good in the back, and we do see it is the Feraligatr as the final Pokemon. So barring a devastating catch by my opponent, this should be a win. So as long as I play carefully, I should be in a good spot. Nice energy management by my opponent as they fire off the Hydro just before I make my next move. In comes the Ferrothorn. I know from game 1 they're running Crunch, so even though they're only on 6, I'm still going to shield because it could potentially be a Crunch, whereas Ice Beam is more energy. I throw 1 and I fire off the Power Whip. Power Whip is going to get the shield, and my opponent, I'm expecting that after this move, they're going to throw 1, wait a turn, and try and catch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep farming. They wait, they try for the catch, just perfect catch attempt, but unfortunately, I was able to see it coming and avoid it. Moonblast connects. I'm going to switch into Vigoroth, simultaneous KO. I have a move on Ferrothorn. They do not have a move on Vigoroth, so we get the equalizer, and it all comes down to game number 3. Winner take all game number 3. I'm running it back with the team from game number 2, as Vigoroth lead is just so strong. So I lead the Vigoroth. Opponent on the lead. It's Lopunny, and this should be a good matchup for the Vigoroth. Vigoroth has a pretty significant pacing advantage here. My opponent is going to keep farming, so I get to fire off the Body Slam. This will do a lot of neutral damage. Body Slam connects. Lopunny throws after 6 double kicks. Hyper Beam is 7, so this can only be a triple axle. I'm going to no shield. It is the triple axle, and I do get the farm down. I exit with energy. They send in the rune to wall the energy. I pivot into the Feraligatr, and they're going to stay in here and debuff me with the Sand Tomb. This tells me whatever's in back, probably not a big fan of the Feraligatr. I'm going to look to overfarm and then fire off the Hydro Cannon, putting pressure on their shields. They let it go. In the back, it's Ninetales. This is a great matchup for Feraligatr, but my defense has been debuffed. So the question will be, can I make another Hydro Cannon? I'm only going to get 1 more. They're going to fire off their energy, forcing the shield. I will get the Hydro Cannon, and this is where the energy that I stored from earlier on the Vigoroth will come in clutch, because I have a Rock Slide stored. I can switch out, snipe with the Rock Slide. This will hit for massive damage. I need to get rid of the Ninetales, or my Ferrothorn gets cooked. Vigoroth gets the farm down, and we complete 5 wins in a row to end with a 5-1 record, good enough for 3rd place in the tournament out of over 50 participants. All in all, I had an absolute blast in the tournament. The participation, like the amount of battlers who competed, was amazing, and I would definitely like to host tournaments like this in the future. So keep an eye out, whether it's via the community tab or in the Discord, because I do want to host more tournaments like this in the future, because this was an insane amount of fun. I do think that Ferrothorn definitely held its weight on the team. It's definitely a spicier option when it comes to the Open Great League, but it ended up putting in quite a bit of work for me. Whereas Shadow Latios, I really do like it, but it felt tough to bring against a lot of teams, especially since I was running into a lot of Mandibuzz. But I did enjoy getting to use it because it can output a tremendous amount of damage in advantage situations. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.